employment. And at the end of the day, what transpired now becomes very interesting. Now, the Nigerian media judge several agreements. Like the Qatar news agency, on the other hand, says only one agreement is signed, and the rest were memoranda of understanding. Now, for the listener out there who's wondering, okay, what's Mr. C about? There's a clear difference between random understanding and agreement. An agreement is two parties coming together with the intention of creating a legal relationship that is binding on both of them. Now, a memorandum of understanding is just what a common Lagos boy would tell a girl, let's see where this is going. Doesn't mean anything. Wow. It doesn't create any binding relationship between the parties, and it cannot be enforced in court. So with an agreement, there can be a breach. With the memorandum of understanding, there's no breach because there was never an intention to create legal relations. So let's even look at some of the matters or some of the subject areas that were considered. There is a memorandum of understanding for cooperation in the education field. I've never heard anything more than abstract. Do we have the same curriculum?
As vague as a Lagos man's lawful.
Yes. Or as vague as a Lagos girl posting my boo with no picture, no name, just my boo on her WhatsApp status.
Lagosians just picking these trees like this. We need comments.
So
Qatar
is known for its advancements in STEM, that is science, technology, and mathematics. There's no indication that any of this is included in this MOU regarding cooperation in education. Qatar is also known for business. There's nothing to indicate that that's also covered in this cooperation with regards to education.
It's in the MOU. It's in the MOU.
It's not like. Anyways, are Nigerian schools, are you looking at a link up between Nigerian universities and Qatari universities? Nothing was said. And which is truly amazing because you would think that for an administration that is determined to showcase its footprint and its successes, that it would have endeavored to provide more details. We then go to an agreement to establish a business house. For the love of it, maybe full sovereign of Nigeria have to travel so that a business council will be established. Why do we have a trade and investment? Couldn't this have been handled by them? We then move on. A memorandum of an agreement on regulating manpower, which is the employment of Nigerians. Again, very pedestrian. We then have a memorandum of understanding and cooperation in the fields of youth and culture. What does that mean? What does it entail? What are we looking at? Are we expecting funding from Qatar? Are we expecting the exchange of experienced personnel to Nigeria? It's all guesses. Then we're looking at a memorandum of understanding for cooperation in the fields of tourism and business events. Again, what does that mean? No details, there's nothing to go by, and yet it is quite puzzling to see how this was celebrated in certain quarters. And it begs the question, what is Nigeria expected to take away from this, which is in line with your question, short-term, mid-term, long-term?
All right, thanks for that, Mr. C. Let's move on to the next headline. And this one comes from The Guardian. Energy scarcity to end in 10 years, says NNPC.
Yeah, so basically what the NNPC GM, Kiari, who made this declaration at the Nigerian International Energy Summit, right in Abuja, he said that the NNPC's commitment to partnership to close the energy deficit and create prosperity for Nigerians is actually sacrosanct, right? So, and there were a couple of things that he advanced as evidence, right? Since the legal money and something right? To indicate that energy scarcity was on the way out. He talked about, for example, the commission of the Obiapo-Bekomo-Ben pipeline. He talked about the willingness of the government to invest in the proposed African Energy Bank. He talked about the fact that there's some tunneling going on across the River Niger, which could pave the way for the laying of more gas pipeline infrastructure. And all of that may be fair and good, right? The question for me is, if those were the only, speaking about details, if those were the only details we offered, I don't think they go far enough, right? You know, our gas infrastructure needs to be significantly expanded. The North is very underserved. Understandable if you talk to a lot of industry practitioners, because they think that a lot of the industrial demand for gas over the next 3 to 5 years is still leading in the south, and this is where, you know, a lot of those gas producing assets are also based. So it's sort of like a first um it's sort of like a first line, a low hanging fruit, right, to consider. But I want to put this out there, right, for consideration. There's only one major gas pipeline that supplies the whole of the southwest. If anything happens to that particular strategic asset, I love how Zibby some paid attention to me when they said that. So it's like, if something happens to that strategic, you know, infrastructure asset in and of itself, we have a gas shortage problem. The conversation, interestingly, around other petroleum products, particularly petrol and diesel, was also either conveniently left out or significantly de-emphasized. And for a lot of Nigerians, I think an integral part of ensuring that we are not only energy independent as a country as a whole, but Nigerians individually feel that they are adequately supplied with an adequate amount of energy for them to, you know, take care of their families, build their lives, grow their businesses, right, and just generally be productive. That conversation is clearly missing, right, from this. So I don't know how you have an abundance of energy without having a clear strategy for addressing every part of the energy mix, which appears to be the real takeaway from, you know, this speech, right, by Kiari. There are interesting questions that are now coming up around the Dangote refinery. Let's not talk about the national refineries, the four refineries that we have, because for all intents and purposes, we do not have refineries, right? So, and then the conversation around whether we are still paying, a fuel subsidy, right? Which, when I remind people, when it comes to energy, it's two subsidies at play. You've got the fuel subsidy, you've got the power subsidy, right? And both of those subsidies are substantially not achieving their purposes and their intents. So whichever way you look at it, it's probably easier to be more melancholic about energy scarcity over the next 10 years than positive. It would be good to get a clearer image from lawmakers and policymakers around what they are actually doing now that will ensure that that happens.
Okay, so but very quickly, yeah, the landing cost of petrol right now is 1,000 naira.
Yep.
So clearly, just speaking the truth, it's clear there's a subsidy.
I mean, it's clear there's a subsidy. There are also noises that but there are noises that the retail price of petrol is about to also go up, right, as well. If we're really not paying a subsidy, there will be up by now.
So I'm just wondering, if we're not paying subsidy and we buy it for as much as 600 and let's say 640 or thereabout, gentlemen, as men who fuel cars, you understand that we shouldn't be buying it at that rate. Do you as much as pay the difference when, or you also buy it at that subsidized rate?
No, I mean, if a subsidy isn't in place ab initio, we should be paying more for petrol.
So you are not happy that it is there, and if the government decides to let it go?
Look, so here's the thing, right? I will not feel happy buying fuel at not of 1,000 naira, but the presence of a subsidy has substantially distorted incentives, governance incentives, right? People just automatically think within the corridor of every power center in this country that there is, at the minimum every year, a 1 trillion naira pile of money that we have to somehow take advantage of. That's a massive incentive that needs to get out of the way. If the price for doing that is more retail fuel prices, but you invest in schools, you invest in road infrastructure, you invest in other forms of critical transport infrastructure, I'm fine with that trade-off.
Well, let's see what it's looking like for core members, if this affects the price of the Alawi and what's going on there.
All right, and let's move on to the nation. This one says, NYC DG to core members, don't waste your time seeking relocation.
Okay, thank you very much. So the DG of the NYSC was in a number of states addressing the batch A-1 core members during the orientation camp. And the statement, the headline was part of the statement he made. And he was saying quite clearly that core members should seek to make some sort of impact in the communities or the states that are assigned to rather than seeking relief effort. Now, this is all well and good because he did say that, look, people have changed their lives, they've improved their lives, they've made their lives better by focusing properly on what NYC stands for and what NYC can offer, and that people have made friends, people have married, and all of that. Now, that is brilliant. He's speaking to you. That's fantastic. Now, the reality is a lot different. Late last year, around November, 8 core members who were heading to their orientation camp in Zamfara were kidnapped. A month later, 4 of them were released. As I speak with you now, 4 of those core members are still in forced captivity. Now, it's no secret that there are a lot of places in Nigeria that are safe, they're not secure. And when you hear the DG of the NYC say, read your handbook and make sure you're familiar with the handbook. And this handbook has become quite notorious because there is a portion that suggests that you should have people on standby in the event you are kidnapped or abducted, and that when you are kidnapped or abducted, you should be friendly with your abductors.
Just to add something to that, the NYSC did come out to say that that was not contained in the handbook. So there isn't, they can't really say if that was, yes, I've seen it. 1 second, Mr. C. So I've seen a lot of people have seen it, but we're going to take the NYC's official position. Okay. That's what the NYC says.
Comes out and says that, but fails to provide its own version or copy of the said handbook.
I've actually seen a different version. So I don't know if it's a reprint or if it's mischief makers at work, but that's what the NYSC says.
I think it's moving forward. It is clear that certain parts of the country are safe. Now, why the DG expects that a potential core member who's deployed to the northeastern corridor or the northwestern corridor, or even some of the volatile parts of the southeast or the south would want to go there and risk being abducted, knowing fully well that our security agencies haven't been able to get everyone who's been forced into captivity out. It then begs the question, if the potential core member feels unsafe, why expect him to go to a place where he feels unsafe? And then what are you expecting him to contribute during that period of service? So I think more importantly, they should be looking to increase their coordination with the various state governments and the security agencies to ensure that not only are the orientation camps safe, but even after that, core members who spend the service year in places that they didn't grow up in, they're not familiar with, are safe. But saying that they shouldn't ask for redeployment, I'm sorry, if people want to actually redeployment, they can. So for example, married women, there is some NYC convention or practice that a married woman should not serve far away from her husband. Is he then saying that no longer applies? What about people who are pregnant? And the list goes on. People who have serious medical conditions that need to be treated and have already started receiving treatment. Surely he cannot be saying they cannot be redeployed close to the places where they're already receiving treatment.
All right, Ikemesit, let's go over this.
Let's look at some of the messages coming through, and then we'll take a quick breather and we'll return.
All right, the message we've got here, D from Alausa. Whether an MOU is legally enforceable depends on its content, the intentions of the parties involved, and the laws of the jurisdiction where enforcement is sought. An MOU that contains specific terms and conditions, such as payment obligations, delivery timelines, or confidentiality requires, may be more likely to be considered enforceable, similar to a contract. That's D from Alausa stating that once again. And then Tochi from Lekki would say, an MOU could be binding if it's expressly stated that it is binding on the parties. So we need to confirm whether the signed MOU is applicable.
So Ikemesit, can you please respond? Because I don't want to say.
No, so I think with respect to those people, I think it's more a case of bad drafting than debating whether an MOU is actually binding or non-binding. If you have clearly binding terms in an MOU, you should not be calling it an MOU. It's something completely different. Right.
All right, thanks for the clarification, Ikemesit. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Stay with us. The conversation continues shortly.
Yeah, like many people do that. It's like people trying to make powers of attorneys. What is it? Instruments of the transfer of rights and properties. People use MOUs for all sorts of things. I see some of these things and I just laugh. Yeah, I just laugh. I have to correct my colleagues at SB and when they're like, just an MOU so that we can get this relationship. You know, like an MOU is not the basis of a relationship.
Anyone who passed law contract should not be serious. The deed from allows, I'm not even to
Yeah. See, with respect to this NYC thing, I don't like the way the NYC talks about it. The NYC talks about it like coppers are the malicious element.
All right, we're going on. It's freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1. It's on Mass and Zibby. We have our analysts in this morning. It's Ikemesit and Mr. C. We see your messages coming through. Please keep them coming. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. And you can also tweet at Smooth981. We're streaming live on YouTube as well. So the channel is Smooth981. You can post a comment and catch the live stream on there as well.
The Vanguard newspaper, Ikemesit, is saying the NLC, that's the Nigerian Labour Congress, writes federal government, dismisses claim of 80% agreement fulfillment. There we go, MOU agreement deal once again. Knowledge will come into this. Help us make a mistake.
Well, actually, the NLC FGF agreement probably has a higher degree of bindingness, right, than your guardian MOU. So basically, what the NLC said in this letter, which was dated on the last day of last month, was that it asked the federal government, oddly enough, I don't know why you would ask the federal government to do that, and this is a direct quote from the reporting, come out clean on any part of the agreement fully fulfilled, and it warned that resorting to propaganda and misinformation is heightening restiveness among citizens. So basically, what if we all recall, there was a phantom warning strike, but there was a warning strike right last week. It was supposed to be for 2 days, right? Was it Wednesday and Thursday or Tuesday and Wednesday?
Tuesday.
27, 28.
It was Tuesday, Wednesday, but it really only happened on Tuesday. It was called off. Actually, it was called off before close of business, right, on Tuesday. And there was media reporting to the effect that this was because the NLC felt like the government had envisaged an intention to begin to move on those agreements that he talked about. You recall that last year we had this dance, right, again, the federal government and the NLC I've lost track, right? So since I started reading and listening to the news, 30 plus years ago, if someone was counting the number of agreements that the government and the NLC has gotten into, it will probably be more than the time to so just like in real number terms, it will probably be north of 60, right? So they got into an agreement last year, right? There were some specific details, right? Things like the 35,000 naira minimum wage award, right? For public sector workers. Remember, the NLC, I think, started at, was it 300K or something? There was a really interesting 200,000, right? There was a really interesting number back there. Restarting the Port Harcourt refinery, cash transfers to poor households, it was supposed to be 25,000 naira to 15 million. Lower income households, tax waivers for small businesses and workers. So there are really specific agreements that the government have committed to doing. In the NLC's estimation, really, if you really think about it, if you actually look at all the reporting since then, none of those things have happened, right? And the NLC's concern is that the government essentially saying we have addressed 80% of the promises that we committed to under those agreements, is in the NLC's mind disinformation. I don't know if I would go that fast to call it disinformation.
No, but it is, and I'll explain. The government just comes out and says we've done 80%, we fulfilled 80%. No details once again, which is systematic and characteristic of this current administration. Stop giving out empty statements without details. And if they're challenged to list out the 80%, they will be unable to list them.
Yeah, I do agree with you on the lack of, I do agree with you on the lack of details. One of the, and I'll wrap up with this, one of the core elements in keeping government accountable is being able to track, is why we love organizations like, SERAP and Budget, right, and track and a lot of these institutions that basically keep us, yes, that basically keep citizens apprised of what government is up to, or more importantly, what government isn't up to, that said they will be up to. So with respect to this, it's an odd thing to say on a Monday morning, but I'm on the NLC side.
All right, thank you for
Sorry.
that, Ikemesit. Let's look at the next headline. This one's coming from Punch. Protest erupts in Just prison over food ration reduction. Mr. C?
Okay, thank you. So on Friday, inmates of the Just Correctional Center got wind of a plan which would basically entail the reduction of their food portions. Now, upon receipt of the SESIs, clearly they were not happy about it. It appears from the reports that they started a protest. Now, initially, the prison or the correctional center officials denied it, but they've now come out to say that indeed it is true and that it's a reflection of the current economic realities all around the country, and that the prisoners or the inmates should understand the current realities and know that the plans being put forward by the federal government are in a bid to tackle the situation, and basically they should just endure. So it's two things. I would like to look at it this way. Yes, some of the inmates, do they deserve to be there? Yes, they have broken the laws in one form or the other. Some are awaiting trial. Now, but nevertheless, whether they've broken the laws or not, their freedom has been limited, their right to liberty has been limited. Now, whilst there, they are still owed dignity, right? And even with the previous portions of food, it was clearly not sufficient because there have been several reports, several documentaries about feeding in Nigerian correctional centers. And when you see the videos from those documentaries, it's really tragic. It's really disheartening. Now to now think that it's being further reduced. So the bigger question is this: what is the real? Because if this is happening at Jos, it's only a matter of time before it gets to the other correctional centers. Now, we know what the issue is. What is the solution? Does it mean increased funding for the correctional centers with regards to food? Yes. Is there money to do it? Big question. And if there's money, is there a political will or desire to ensure that that money gets in correctional
Why
centers?
do I have the sense that I'm not getting certificates?
Okay, help me, please.
No, I'm
Or is it-
So basically, it's something the authorities need to nip in the bud. But again, Nigerian authorities over time, over decades, have traditionally shown that they're experts in fiber approach and in tackling anything type of function and start to respond. So they don't rather reaction. But this is one time we should get in front of this and ensure that protests are next to the board and any dissent is going to be judged.
All right, let's look at some of the messages coming through. This one is from JP and he says, memo or agreement. I can't understand why, as a nation, we don't know the difference. Begin with the end in mind. No gas agreements or collaborations. What was the purpose of this trip? As for the NNPC, speak less and do more. Accountability is zero, in my opinion. And I've got another message. This one is from Damilola. Damilola says, I just want to thank Mr. C for the daily dose of.
Nice.
Okay. Ayox says, who says subsidy is bad? Most governments subsidize fuel prices, including in the US. Chibuzo says the NYC law needs to be rephrased or an additional line added to support equal opportunities for both male and females. Married men should also be allowed to relocate closer to their spouses. Okay. Tunde Busari says, imagine, okay, you know what? I'm gonna hold that message. Let's go to the next headline.
Monday vibe.
All right, Ikemesit, if you just run us up, let's just conclude with this story. That's the minister pledges government's commitment to global technology trade. That's coming from the Punch newspaper, if you can do this in a minute.
Yeah, so the Communications Innovation and Digital Economy Minister, Tijani, basically told the National Council on Communications Innovations and Digital Economy that the country is the primary goal of this administration is to enhance Nigeria's participation in the global technology trade. He talked about things like the National Broadband Plan, the National Policy on Digital Public Infrastructure, the National Policy on Telecoms. I have to give it to this ministry. They are probably the one ministry where when they interface with the public, when they speak with the public, it's with facts, it's with data, there's clarity on what they are trying to do. The National Broadband Plan has a 50% broadband penetration target. There is a new policy document that includes that of that number, 50% of those eligible individuals, right, that will be covered will be physically challenged. So we have a clear understanding of what they are trying to do. So if they get to it, if they accomplish those things, we know. If they don't accomplish those things, we know. It's easy, simple, sensible governance, but you can only do it if you actually want to govern and govern right. So it's almost as though the absence of details evinces an intention to not want to do anything. So kudos to the ministry on this. Again, it remains to be seen with all of the other macroeconomic issues and all of these things.
Message. And whatever deal that would be agreed between the two countries, Qatar, Nigeria, it should be timely and fair for the present and future daily from Leki's message. Orov's message comes up. Well, I know that we all know that the NYCDG, well, seemingly...
Can't be serious.
Well, it goes on. You really think any parent would risk their wards deployed to the northeast of the country to go anywhere, right? It's not happening, never. And what else is Busari all about? Well, then we'll go back to find a message here. That's Damilola's message actually back here. It says, this is, from Lagos Island. Well, thank you, Mr. C, with lots of flowers this morning on his table for daily dose of, well, he says, what he sees as negative, and then he says, it doesn't fail to deliver for him. That's what we're looking at. Gilbert's message, final message.
Okay, Gilbert says the NNPC should focus on reducing oil theft, which has negatively impacted our revenue as a country. Thanks for your message, Tunde. We try to make sure that all the news is verified before we put it out. So thank you for that. And that is it for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thanks for your messages. Thanks for listening. And special thanks to our analysts, the legal analyst, of course, Ikemesit and Mr. C.
My pleasure.
Do stay with us. There is a lot more